Hello, kind friends, and I hope you're off to, well, I hope you've had a great week, and I hope you're having a great Friday so far. We're wrapping up the day, and I'm so excited. I love it when the weekend comes and we get to tick off all the boxes in our to-do lists. And here at my home, we just finished a huge landscaping project, so I'm glad to be able to tick that off and happy to have you with me for this dehydrating class. As most of you probably do your home improvements or jobs in the summertime, and you uncover one great thing and you're so excited to have that finished, as I am, as we are. There are a million other things that you discover that need to be done, and so I'm excited to take the next few weeks before the snow flies, probably a couple or 3 months, to really get some home improvement done and get some organizing jobs checked off my list. So I'm super, super excited. I hope you have fun plans for the weekend as well. I'm wondering how many of you out there have gardens and how many of you out there have been dehydrating, because this is full dehydrating season right now. And so I wanted to make sure to sneak this class in for those of you who are curious about dehydrating, who've never tried it, or those of you who have done it but maybe just need another refresher. I'm so excited when I drive by and see community gardens, because I feel like it's a great way to not only teach people how to garden, but also be able to share the produce and see what grows and what's in your season and in your place, and how those can thrive. I'm so excited to have a neighbor right next door who allows me to pick from his garden every day, and I feel super, super blessed for that, because we have really yummy food around here. So I'm so excited about his gardening and what he's taught me that one of my projects this fall is to actually set up a raised bed garden so that I can start doing that in the spring. So I'm super excited. Well, a lot of you know that food drying has been around for a long period of time, and we've done it for years and years and years, and it just becomes more and more sophisticated. In fact, now we're not only drying foods, but there's freeze drying that's available as well, and we're going to be talking about that too, because I'm going to help you understand what's the difference between buying dehydrated foods or making your own dehydrated foods and purchasing freeze-dried foods, and why those are a great idea as well, because they certainly have their place in your long-term food storage supply. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on dehydrating, and hopefully this will be super helpful for you. Now, I will give you a disclaimer. You do not have to have a commercial dehydrator to enjoy dehydrated foods. You can simply do it in your oven. The reason I like a dehydrator is because I can actually put the dehydrator outside where I don't have the added heat and I don't have the added noise. But if you want to start with dehydrating foods in your oven, you can simply do that at 120 to 150 degrees. You can even do multiple racks, and I would recommend that you put it on convection bake if you have a convection oven. This way the air will circulate and you'll be really happy with the results. It may take a little bit longer to dehydrate foods in your oven, but you'll enjoy the flavor and you'll have learned a new skill. So let's dive in. I'm going to give you some tips and ideas, and really most of all for the regular dehydrator, but they can be adapted again for your oven as well. So the first thing that you want to do when you're considering dehydrating is to look at the equipment that you're going to use. Because not only will we need a dehydrator, but we're also going to need tools to process our food. And so let's talk about those. Let's start with the obvious. How do you choose the perfect dehydrator for you? I think that one of the key things that you want to look at is, number one, how much food are you going to harvest? Do you have a huge garden, or do you have access to a lot of produce? Or is it something you just want to try, and maybe you just want a 4-rack dehydrator, and that might be enough for you. But if you have a large family, or you're going to really go gangbusters this year and you're going to dehydrate, I would start with at least an 8-tray dehydrator and one that can expand up to 20 trays. That seems like a lot, but food takes up a lot of space, and it's really nice to have additional trays. Now, the dehydrator that I've used for years is the Garden Master by American Harvest. And I love it because it's round, first of all, and I like to do fruit leather, and so I like the round rolls of fruit leather. but it also can stack 20 trays, which is great. I can do leathers at the bottom that take more time, and then I can do vegetable chips and tomato chips, and then I can do apple chips, and I can do pineapple, I can do whatever I want. And so I put the foods that take the least amount of time at the top, because I'll be taking them off, and then I put the foods that take the longest amount of time on the bottom, and then I don't really have to rotate a whole bunch, and that's really nice. The thing about the American Harvest dehydrator is it has a hole in the center. That means that the air can flow all the way through the dehydrator really nice and evenly. Now, I'm also a fan of the Excalibur dehydrator, and this one is a rectangular dehydrator. It has, I think, 6 or 8 rectangle trays, which is great, but I just personally have loved the one that has the airflow in the middle because I feel like I get better coverage. So, the Garden Master, again, also comes with different trays. So all of your dehydrators are going to come with this basic tray that looks like this. It just has kind of some holes in it, okay? And see the airflow in the middle. That's what we have. And then you have the option to add other trays. You have the fruit leather tray, which is kind of solid like this, and it's opaque. Do you see this? That way you can do all of your fruit leathers or liquid things. And then you also have a mesh tray. Now these mesh trays are great for vegetables that might be a little bit smaller, corn, onions, things like that might fall through, so that allows it not to do that. And one thing I'm going to really encourage you to do before I forget, I might not get to that part, is to lightly oil your trays before you actually put food on them. That includes fruit leather, that includes zucchini chips, tomato chips, apples, anything like that, because the thinner you slice your vegetables, the more tendency they have to stick. So just a really light coating of oil is a good idea, okay? And try to get something that's a really good oil so that as it heats, it's not gonna affect or make your food taste bad. You don't wanna use a really heavy olive oil, for example. Something super, super light will do. All right. So another tool that's important to use, now you've decided which dehydrator you're going to use, is to decide how are you going to process those foods. So how are we going to cut them, slice them, dice them? It's always important when dehydrating to know that everything needs to be exactly the same thickness, because if you don't do the same thickness, you're going to have a hard time sifting through which ones are done first and which ones are done later. So it's easier to have tools like this. This is a mandolin, and many of you have this in your kitchen, but I love the mandolin because I can quickly process zucchinis, squashes, carrots, whatever you want on that, and it goes really, really quickly. Another tool, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is the apple peeler corer slicer. This can be found, I love mine through the Pampered Chef, but you can also buy it on Amazon. And this tool is a must-have if you're going to dehydrate apples. We'll get to that in a minute. And also a great thing for potatoes. All right, now if you're just going to not have all these cool little tools, mandolins and graters and all that, but you want to just use a knife, then make sure that the knife that you use is stainless steel. Why? Because it will prevent browning of your food. And we'll talk about browning in just a minute. So again, look at the equipment. You want your dryer, how you're going to process your food. Make sure you have time to be able to do it and get your batches done and not feel rushed and not leave them there on the counter, because a lot of times we'll want to do a bunch of apricots or a bunch of peaches, and then we get halfway through and we decide, either I ran out of trays or I ran out of days, right? So it's important to decide how much of that food is going to fit, and maybe you do it in batches, maybe you do several days in a row, or you just do it on the weekends. So that's important to know as well. Okay, so let's talk about when is it perfect to harvest the food. And the rule of thumb is, if it's perfect for eating, it's perfect for drying. Now think, if you pick food that is underdone or not quite ripe, you're going to get tasteless dehydrated food. It's a complete waste. It's completely tasteless and it's tough. If you choose food that's overripe, you're going to have bruising, which could cause mold, which nobody wants, or it's just really going to be just unpleasant to eat. So when it's perfect for eating, it's perfect for drying. You want to make sure if your food is overripe, let's say you have overripe strawberries and they're just on the verge, then don't dry them, make fruit leather. And we're going to talk about leathers in a minute, because you can also do vegetable leathers. And that sounds kind of odd, but we're going to talk about that. So always remember that thumb. If you feel like you can eat it and it's just perfect that way, then it's okay for drying. If not, then maybe puree or freeze that food. How do we prepare the food for the dehydrator? Let's start with fruits. Now, fruits oftentimes have to be peeled, things like apples and pears, things that have maybe a tougher skin. But other fruits like apricots or bananas or peaches, they do not need to be peeled. They can just be washed and sliced and put on the dehydrator. Again, make sure that they're super, super uniform in size. Now, if you have, if after slicing your fruit, and it's a fruit like apples or pears or peaches that could go brown, one idea I like to do is to either dip them in pineapple juice or dip them in lemon juice. Now, if you want to use a fresh lemon, you can use fresh lemon juice, or what I like to always have on hand is lemon powder, organic lemon powder, and you can buy that again on Amazon or through Penzeys Spice. And you just put a teaspoon of powder in about a cup of water, and it dissolves instantly, and then you just put your fruit in there. When I do fruit pizzas, I do that as well, because then they never go brown. So you can do your bananas, you can do your apples, everything, and they are this beautiful white color when they're done. So there's a good idea before processing or dehydrating your fruits. Now let's go back to the apple peeler core slicer. I love this tool. For those of you who are familiar with it, you know that it will peel and slice and prepare your apples all at the same time. So basically you just put your apple here, the whole apple. It will core, you'll just turn this little handle and it'll take out the core while it slices your apples, and you just pull it right off and there's no more peel on it. Then you just slice it down the middle and you have these perfectly sliced apple slices. So this is great for your dehydrator, and it's great for making apple pie and apple crisp and all kinds of things. Another way that people use this tool is to slice and dice or slice and peel their potatoes. You can put the core down so it won't take the core out. It won't make a hole in the middle of your potato, but it's a really quick way to do potatoes. And if you're wanting to have your kids help you, this is a great tool, and it just suctions right to the countertop. One thing I will say though is do not dehydrate your own potatoes. There are safety issues with potatoes, just like there are with eggs. Don't ever dehydrate your own eggs. I would highly recommend that you purchase freeze-dried potatoes, and they come in so many different varieties. You can buy hash browns, dices, slices, cubes. I mean, it's endless. So potatoes really are inexpensive in the freeze-dried form, and also the hash browns, they're just dehydrated and they're delicious, and those can be easily reconstituted. So those are a vegetable I would never dry. All right, now let's see what I've missed. All right, I wanted to mention, when you buy freeze-dried fruits or vegetables, and we'll talk about this more at the end, did you know that they have a 25-year shelf life if it's a good retailer? And I'm going to share with you the retailer that I love the best and why their products are so good. But I would consider there are certain vegetables that I will not dehydrate, things like peppers, because they're super inexpensive to buy dehydrated in the can, and you can get like 45 peppers in a can, which I could never harvest from a garden. So peppers I do hash browns, I buy any kind of potato that I want to get. I also do freeze-dried broccoli, freeze-dried cauliflower, freeze-dried corn, and freeze-dried celery. Those are my top, and freeze-dried mushrooms. I love those in the freeze-dried variety. Everything else I like to dry in the dehydrator. So, and I'm not a fan of dehydrated or freeze-dried carrots, so I just don't use them. I can do without carrots. Another thing I really love is dehydrated onions. You can easily dehydrate your onions on your fruit leather trays, and they dehydrate really beautifully and really quickly. I just think they're so inexpensive. I don't want to have the tears and the mess doing onions. So I just purchase those. All right, let's talk about vegetables now that we've kind of gone over fruit a little bit, and we're going to come back to fruit when we talk about leathers, but just hold on here. When we're doing vegetables, it's really a good idea to determine, first of all, do any of those vegetables need to be blanched? Now, for those of you who are new to dehydrating, blanching is simply putting a big pot of water on the stovetop, waiting for it to come to a boil, and then throwing in those sliced or diced vegetables for about 2 minutes just to soften up that fiber. If you don't soften up that fiber, it's going to just be a really yucky texture when you take it out. So things like broccoli or cauliflower or carrots, corn, those are things that I would throw in to be blanched before dehydrating. Other fruits like zucchinis, tomatoes, squash, those are simple to do without blanching. And of course, some of my absolute favorite snacks are these little zucchini chips. Aren't they cute? And so thin and crispy. And these tomato chips. And all I do is I just take my mandolin and I quickly slice. In fact, the zucchini, I like to slice at an angle so that the chips are bigger. And they're just more oblong and they're pretty and you get more in your mouth. And after I'm done slicing all of those, I'll gently spray my fruit leather tray, or you can even do it on the little mesh tray. Get that nice and a little bit oily so they don't stick. And then I throw them all on super close to one another, but just not overlapping. And then I sprinkle it all with lemon pepper. Now this is both my zucchini and my tomatoes. So in 4 or 5 hours, they're crispy, they're delicious, and they're the perfect summertime snack. And they last, a couple months. What I would do is when they're done and completely dry, remember if there's any moisture, they'll cause mold and then it'll ruin your whole batch. But when you're done with these crisps, just put them in a glass mason jar, airtight container, and off you go. Now, one thing that you can remember is that if you do a lot of dehydrating, let's say you're doing carrots or onions or peppers or any of that stuff, if you have a food sealer and you want to put one of those oxygen absorbers in, then vacuum seal it and it'll last even longer. So I got rid of mine. I don't use it, so I just do enough that it'll last me maybe the season, and that's enough. All right. So I want to dive in really quickly to leathers, and a lot of people think about fruit leather, and that's really great, but there are also really good vegetable leathers. So let's say you harvest a ton of tomatoes, and tomatoes are kind of finicky, right? You'll harvest tomatoes. I like Roma tomatoes for slicing because they have very few seeds, but I don't like to dehydrate the big juicy tomatoes with lots and lots of seeds. So what I do instead is I throw them all in a blender, get them all nice and saucy, and then you can put a little bit of lemon pepper, basil, whatever you want as far as the herbs, and then you throw it on your dehydrating tray. Remember, you've sprayed a little bit with olive oil or like an avocado oil because it doesn't taste really strong. And then I can make a blender full and it'll fill 3 trays. So I put this puree on. You can add to the tomatoes, onions or garlic or zucchini if you want, but tomatoes just is perfect for me. A little, maybe tomatoes and garlic. And then I'll pour it on, and it does take 12 or 13 hours to dehydrate because there's a lot of wet in there. And then when it's done, just roll it up. If you're ever in a position where either you don't have tomato sauce, you don't have spaghetti sauce, it is so simple to use this. You can just get a dish of like boiling water or a pot, throw it in, and instantly it'll just dissolve into a really good tomato sauce or a tomato base for your vegetable soup. So it's yummy, and it's vegetables that came from your garden anyway. Do you know what? I actually love eating tomato chips like fruit leather because I think it just has that savory kick that's just yummy. And so anyway, there's an idea for vegetable leathers. Again, you can use all kinds of varieties, whatever tastes good to you. It's kind of fun to experiment with those. Now let's talk about fruit leathers. I'll tell you that my fruit leather recipe has been one of the biggest hits. One of those things that you make and everybody wants it. I used to sell my fruit leather. There were all these people in my neighborhood who like buy it for me for their kids, and I eventually was selling them at schools. And I even went as far as to someone proposed to have me go into manufacturing and have me manufacture this fruit leather. It was such a hit, and they loved it. But I never shared my secret, and I'm going to share it with you because it'll probably never go to market. But I want to share with you because it is so yummy and so easy to do. Now, I've had a lot of people say, well, when you make fruit leather, doesn't it just take tons and tons and tons of fruit? What if I can't harvest that many strawberries? Or what if my raspberries only make like enough for half a roll? It's not worth the energy and the time. Well, here's where the secret ingredient comes in. Are you ready? It's applesauce. Now, what does applesauce do to the fruit leather? It not only makes your fruit go further because you're using mostly applesauce and just a little bit of that highlighted fruit, but it also has a lot of pectin. And pectin makes food soft and pliable. Have you ever had fruit leather that's crunchy? Sometimes I make my fruit leather crunchy on purpose because I love fruit leather chips. And this is what fruit leather chips look like. They're just these nice little I call them kind of like fruit leather crackers. So instead of making it super pliable and soft, sometimes I'll over dry it so it's really crispy. I can just break it with my hands. Then I throw it in a jar and it makes a really fun snack. Or you can, of course, make your leather in these long rolls like everybody does, and you can make them in a gazillion colors, and I'm going to share my other secret with you. And then once I have them in these long rolls, I like to just kind of cut them into 3 or 4 of these. So these just stay in a nice little airtight bag, and when everybody wants them, they can get them. Great for school snacks or backpacking trips or whatever. So it's just fun. So let's go back to the applesauce. I used to buy these big tubs, as big as I can get them, of unsweetened applesauce. They used to sell them at Costco, but now they just sell them in the bottles, which is fine. Get the applesauce that has no added sugar. And it doesn't really need that extra cinnamon unless you really like it, but you can add the cinnamon yourself. So in your blender, put 4 cups of applesauce in the blender. That's going to be your base. And then if you want to make strawberry leather, raspberry leather, peach leather, apricot leather, you only need 1 cup of that fruit. 1 cup. And the entire batch will taste like that fruit. It will not taste like apples, but the apples will just make it stretch and it'll be beautiful. So then I add 1 cup of the fruit, I add 4 cups of applesauce, and then I add either a half a cup of pineapple juice, which will keep it nice and light and bright. It won't go brown. Or you can just add water if you don't want that much sugar. But the last thing, and this really is the key, and you know what? I am not a fan of Jell-O. I never eat it. I never make it for my family. But the only time I use it is in fruit leather, and I'll tell you why. Because it gives just that beautiful color. I know it has sugar. That's why I don't add sugar to my fruit leather. And it's not going to kill you, but it also has some gelatin in it, right? And again, it's the pliability. So if I want a raspberry leather, then I will put 1/3 of a packet of raspberry Jell-O in the blender. If I want orange, it'll be orange. If I want lime, it'll be lime. And even if all you do is not add fruit, but just do an applesauce leather with the lime flavoring, it will taste like lime, or it will taste like grape. And you can make all these fun colors. The kids go crazy. So again, it's not the healthiest thing in the world because there's Jell-O in it. And yes, there is a little bit of added sugar, but you know what? It's a fun treat. And this is the secret. And nobody else will know it but you. But it's been a hit for years, and I'm so excited to share it with you. And that's something that I've always loved to do in my dehydrator. Again, if you don't want to do the rolls, and one little tip, when you do your fruit leather, remember 1 blender full makes 3 rolls of leather. You want to peel that leather off. It'll probably take about 11 hours to get nice and dry. But before it gets super crispy, if you like it soft, pull it right off, roll up the fruit leather, and then put the entire thing in plastic wrap. That's the easiest way to do it. And then you can cut them down. If you love fruit leather crisps like I do, I like it better than fruit leather, then over dehydrate it, maybe give it 2 or 3 more hours, and then just break it like shards and put it in a glass, and it is so yummy. Okay? All right, so there's leather. All right. I want to make sure. All right, now when you make fruit leather, or sometimes there are foods that will stick to your trays, what's the best way to clean those trays? Because they can get sticky and yucky. Well, I have a really simple thing to do. You just fill your bathtub maybe halfway full with really hot water, as hot as you can stand. Just turn on the hot water. Put in maybe a half of a cup of Epsom salt and let them soak for 4 or 5 hours, or just overnight. And you know what? They will be crystal clean when they're done. All of that just dissolves. It's nice and clean. All the stuff goes down your drain, and you have these beautiful, nice trays that you can just, throw some soap over, wash them, and use them again. And be really careful what kind of spray you use on your trays, because if you use spray like Pam, it will turn orange and really gunky and have that film. But if you use a natural oil like avocado oil or even a vegetable oil, then you won't have that film. And I would just encourage you to just clean them off every time, and you'll have these beautiful trays for a long time to come. I've had my dehydrator for years. The one place that I find gets really sticky and messy is down by the base underneath all of the trays where kind of the motor lives. So make sure to wipe that down really well with soap and water when you're done. And again, if you want to dehydrate outside, it takes the heat and the noise away. You'll miss the yummy smells, but it's a great way to just out of sight, out of mind, and let it do its work. For those of you who like meat and like jerky, I used to do this a long time ago when my kids were little. I used to make homemade beef jerky. And there are jerky guns that you can buy on Amazon. They're super simple to use. You basically flavor your ground meat. Make sure it has some high fat in it if you're going to do it, because it just does better. It dehydrates better. and you just stuff it in that little gun. You squeeze it out, and it comes in these perfect little ropes. My boys used to love the jerky. Now I'm a little more leery just because of the chemicals, I think, in the flavorings, but I think it's still better than buying it store-bought. All right, and jerky, if you're going to do it, only takes 4 hours to dehydrate, and you can freeze that or you can store it for up to a year. So that's a good protein snack. Okay, now that we know how to process our foods, and if I've missed something and you have a question, feel free to leave it in the chat, and I'm happy to answer that for you. But let's talk about using those dehydrated foods once we've stored them. And remember, glass is the best way to store those foods so that they won't leach and that they'll just be preserved longer, unless you're doing food saver. I like to do food saver in glass jars as well, and there's a glass jar attachment, so consider that if you're going to be using those for long-term storage. Remember that the food should be pliable. It should not be super brittle, so over dry, and it should, unless it's like onions or peppers or things like that, and it shouldn't be moist at all, because again, moisture breeds mold, and that's never what we want. If you dehydrate foods, you can keep those for up to 12 months, and they'll be perfectly good to use. Now, I would love to share with you, I have a whole ebook on dehydrated foods and recipes. Everything from potato latkes and zucchini chocolate cake, to yogurt chips and hobo stew. All of those are things that you can use with your dehydrated foods. Speaking of yogurt chips, have you ever heard of yogurt chips? Crazy idea. But I tried them once. I just had this idea, you know what? I had some flavored yogurt, and I thought, well, if I can make fruit leather, why couldn't I make yogurt chips? So what you do is you buy your favorite flavored yogurt. I know there's added sugar, so I don't do this a lot, but it's really tasty. And if you're thinking about camping, hiking, kids camps, whatever, this is a great one. So my favorites are raspberry or peach, and I like them with the chunks in it. So I take that. If you don't like chunks, you can just blend it to be really, really smooth. I put a thin layer of oil, again, just spray it on my fruit leather roll, on my fruit leather tray. And then I take a cookie scoop, like the 2 tablespoon one or 1 tablespoon one, and I just scoop those little balls on the fruit leather tray. Now you want to make sure to give them some room in between each other because they'll spread. So if you start with maybe a quarter size of a dollop, it'll spread twice that big. And it will take 13 hours for these to dry. So this is definitely an overnight dehydrating project. But when they're done, they're just super soft and chewy. It tastes like a creamsicle exploded in your mouth. It's so yummy, and kids love it. Well, adults love it too. So give it a try, yogurt chips. Okay, isn't this fun? I mean, there's so much that you can do with dehydrating. Let's talk about reconstituting dried fruits and vegetables. Now, let's say that you are there's a recipe that calls for fresh onions or fresh green peppers. You're going to do 1/3 of what it asks for. So it asks for a cup of peppers. You're going to do a 1/3 cup of dehydrated peppers. And the way you do that is you just boil some water, put it in a bowl, and then put your vegetables in for 20 to 40 minutes. They'll reconstitute and they'll get nice and fluffy and big, just as if they were fresh, and then you can use them. Now, if you're doing a soup, of course, you don't have to reconstitute them. Just add a little bit more water or more broth to the soup, and they'll come alive and they'll be great. You can do a combination of vegetables, let's say peppers, onions, carrots, corn, and then you can just season it, and then you can make your own little soup packets. So that's kind of nice. All you do is just add all the extras, if you're adding meat or if you're adding potatoes or whatever you want. And so it makes it super, super easy. When you're doing hash browns, for example, and these, again, I love hash browns that are dehydrated from this source that I'll tell you about in a minute. And what I do is I just take a couple of cups of dehydrated hash browns and I throw boiling water over them. And within 20 minutes, they're so yummy, and they're already a little bit seasoned. I think there's onions and a little bit of salt in it. My kids love the hash browns, and that's kind of been a staple. I love that for once in a while to make them breakfast. So that's a good one. So when you want to add vegetables, again, to a soup, you don't have to reconstitute them ahead of time. You can just add them to the broth. When using dried fruits, though, let's say you're doing cakes or muffins, you do want to dehydrate those ahead of time, and they're going to absorb plenty of water as well. If you happen to reconstitute too much food and it's more than you need, then just make sure to drain them well, put them in the refrigerator, and they'll stay for up to 2 days so that you can come up with another recipe to use them in. Now, another way to use your dehydrated vegetables is to make vegetable powder or vegetable seasonings, which is really yummy. So you can just take a combination of your vegetables. Let's say they're maybe nearing their expiration date. This would be a good time to do that. Throw them in a food processor, make a powder into them. You can add breadcrumbs and you can season your meats or your whatever you want to do with that. So you can make actually seasonings with your vegetables, with your dehydrated vegetables. So I want to kind of wrap up the training by talking about freeze-dried vegetables. We're going to come back to this, freeze-dried fruits and vegetables. And why do we do this? First of all, it's because the shelf life is super long. Again, it's 25 years versus 1 or 2 years if you've dehydrated your own food. Freeze-dried food I love, especially the fruits. So I like to get freeze-dried raspberries and blueberries and strawberries and pineapple and mango. Those are all available at this retailer. And I'm going to tell you right now, Grandma's Country Foods I used to be a spokesperson for them for a couple of years. And I believe they're still around. It's been a while since I've shopped there, but they're right here in Salt Lake City. You can look them up, Grandma's Country Foods. And the brand of freeze-dried and dehydrated foods they sell is Everest Mountain Foods. Now, after this episode airs, I'm going to share a bunch of videos if you want to follow. And if you want to see each time one airs, make sure to push the notification or the like button on my Simply Living Smart page, and you'll see each time those come up. In those videos that I've shot, I make recipes out of those very specific Everest Mountain foods that they sell. And they are amazing. I mean, I'm really fussy about food, especially prepared food, and I've tasted them all. They have dinner recipes, rice recipes, and soups, and gluten-free items, and baked goods, and I mean, fruits and vegetables, you wouldn't even believe the combinations. And the quality is so good. I've seen the warehouse, I've seen how they process it, and it's really, really top quality. And that's what I want to share with you. I get nothing back from them. I have no affiliation with them at this point, but I love their products, and my storage is full of them. And so they even have freeze-dried yogurt, and it comes in little tiny balls, and it's so yummy. And they have vanilla and cherry and blueberry, and really, really good. They also have freeze-dried meats. So if you love meat and you want a good quality of freeze-dried meat, there's where you want to go. They have pork and chicken and ground beef, and I mean, in every variety. So I would highly recommend, again, Everest Mountain Foods or Grandma's Country Foods. Google them and look at their supply, and you'll be super, super impressed. The vegetables that I like to get, again, I'm going to just reiterate because a lot of people say, well, what are the best ones that you use? I get their freeze-dried mushrooms, their freeze-dried potatoes, their dehydrated hash browns, their dehydrated red and green peppers, which I love, their dehydrated onions, their freeze-dried broccoli, their freeze-dried cauliflower, their freeze-dried raspberries, pineapple, bananas, peaches, and a few of their organic meals. Now, their meals are great because they're not that powdery, they taste like a camping lunch. I mean, it's nothing like that. They actually freeze dry the foods, so they're super, super fresh, and then you just add the boiling water, and they are super tasty. I mean, the rice is like al dente. Their pastas are delicious in the dinners that they have. So give them a try. I can't say enough about them. Okay, and again, for those of you who don't have dehydrators and you want to try dehydrating, remember you can use your oven. And if you have a convection oven, great, put it on the convection setting. That allows you to use multiple racks at about 120 to 150 degrees and allow air to rotate. If you don't have a convection oven and you just have a regular, then just a low heat, you can do one tray at a time. You'll find, though, that burns so much more energy than having a dehydrator that you're going to eventually want to get a good dehydrator. And you know what? I bet I bought mine for $100 and I've had it for years. It has so paid for itself over and over again. So it's a really nice tool to have. And just so you know, you can also dehydrate things like kale chips. Kale is another thing where if you get it right out of the garden, it's really kind of bold and fibrous. That can be blanched really quick till it's just a little bit soft, and then sprinkled with lemon pepper, put it on your trays, and in 4 hours you've got great kale chips. You can also do any kinds of like lemon zest, orange zest. I've done that a lot if I want just to add zest to dishes down the line, and then I dehydrate them, put them in little glass jars, and I have them in my fridge. Another thing is you can, of course, dry herbs, and herbs dry really, really quickly, things like basil or parsley. So instead of just hanging them on your counter, you can actually put them in the dehydrator, and they preserve very, very well. Okay, well, I hope this has given you some good ideas. I'm super excited for those of you who are going to try dehydrating for the first time. And if you have questions and are curious about foods and can they be dehydrated and how should they be processed, drop me a quick line and I'm happy to give you my opinion. Now, I'm just going to let you know I've got a million projects lined up, and I still am eager to bring you classes and do Facebook Live. I've got a whole lot of things I want to study and get ready for you, but I've decided I'm going to take some weeks off to really get some projects done before the snow flies. I need to get some things done, but I also want to prepare myself to be able to bring you even better training. There are some things that I really want to study and be prepared for. I've put a lot of time and energy into doing the organization challenge, and remember, if you're new to Simply Living Smart and you want to look up that organization challenge, we took 5 weeks to walk through every room in your home and organize those. There are also 12 or 13 other Facebook Live trainings that I've done that are on the Simply Living Smart page. Because I won't be going live for the next few weeks, I will be posting videos, again, of this freeze-dried and dehydrated foods, and also other smart minutes that I've created so that I don't leave you high and dry. But I hope that you're going to enjoy it. And if there's any topics that you would like me to address in the coming weeks and months, please drop me a line. I am here for you, and I'm so excited to have a community of people who love learning as much as I do and love to share. And I hope that you feel like I'm here for you and I'm cheering you on. So friends, have a wonderful, productive weekend. Enjoy dehydrating and everything else you do, and know that I'm here for you and super excited to come back. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.